one of the things that happened with High Tech High was that there were some of us who'd worked in traditional high schools for 20 years, so we knew what not to allow to be coming in here, because there's a lot of things that society expects schools have to have that they don't necessarily have to have when you think about it. So partly it was about a group of people who knew what they didn't want and also what they were going to aspire to do. And there's a gap between what you aspire to do and what you actually accomplish. And you need to give license to everybody that that's okay for us to aspire to be something greater than we are. It's okay in the sense that that means that we're still always aspiring, and that means that we're still always improving. So we try to create mechanisms in the early going for improvements that most schools have. And in terms of leadership, some of those mechanisms are public exhibitions of student work, in particular, letting products kind of speak for themselves. So when a teacher said, how do you judge a good teacher? We say, by the quality of their work. And that's what we said from the very early going. The first thing I would do if I were starting to do something like this within the traditional public school that I worked in, which is 350 years old, and I spent 17 years there, so I'm very accustomed to a school that has a very embedded culture and rule making, lots of rules, would be to get to know everyone individually, have lots of one-on-one conversations, and find out what it is that people are feeling that they're really interested in. Because a lot of teachers who are maybe 45 or 46 years old, or whatever age, when they were 19 years old, they decided at university what they should major in. And they're not very mature when they made that decision, and then for the rest of their life they can only teach that and not something else, which is part of the system that we inherit in education that really doesn't allow for as much rejuvenation. So if somebody has an interest now that is deeper than what they got credentialed in, I try to find a way to discover what that is from them, and then give them license to bring it in and integrate it with the thing that they're obligated to do. And they usually say, "Oh, I can do that too." I said, "Yes, you can bring that in too. We want you to be excited, because that will transfer to the kids." Then there are exercises that you can do, several of them. I don't know if you've done any of them, but the most memorable learning experience exercise is a very good one. That's a good sort of divination process of midwifery, of people's recognizing after they've done the project, they realize that the pedagogy that worked best for them when they were the age of the students they teach is actually not what they're doing through no fault of their own, and that actually why don't they just do what really worked for them. And the beauty of that exercise is that it demonstrates to practitioners who've been working hard and at it for some time that this didn't come from a legislature, it didn't come from any authorizer, it came from inside them. So in both meeting everyone individually and in doing the most memorable learning exercise, we're trying to begin from starting where the learner is, which is what we do with our students. That's also what we want to do with teachers. So that's one process. The hobbies and avocations exercise is one, which brings out what are the things that you most are interested in doing when you're not in school, and then saying, oh, well, let's see if you can, oh, you're into photography and you teach biology. Well, we've been publishing some books about the flora and fauna of San Diego. Why don't you bring that in? Oh, I can bring that in here. So that's another one. Another exercise is about the school narrative, where you put on the wall of a school piece of paper that say, 1970, 1975, 1980, 1985, 1990, 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010, and you ask all the faculty to stand up next to, as close to the year that they started as possible, and then you cluster those people in groups of 3 or 4 and have them sit for 20 minutes or half an hour and talk about what was the narrative when you started in 1980. What was the schools there? Because there are different narratives actually, somewhat at different times, and then they share what all those narratives are with each other publicly, and then at the end you have a process of, well, what do we want the narrative to be for a new teacher in 2011? So these are all exercises just to kind of get people moving and thinking, and so those are some of the other things that I would do. And then also have public exhibitions of student work, where we don't want teachers working in autonomous isolation. And we're not scolding them if their work isn't as good as other people's, but we're actually putting it out there so people can see it, and then we can all say, that was really good, that wasn't so good. Next time, I'm going to make mine look like that really good thing. So they actually have an example that we're holding up as, this is really what we're looking at. This is more like what we're looking at. So there's some technical things that you can do. What tends to happen is that rules get added and they don't get taken away. And so schools become very rules bound. And there's less and less oxygen with more and more rules. And a lot of the rules are really not necessary. And you experience that here because the viewer is not here, but basically to the viewer, this building is 39,000 square feet. Let's say it's 40,000 square feet. That under U.S. rules, you're supposed to have about 100 square feet per kid. That means there should be 400 students in this building. There's 538 students in this building, and it works. One of the ways it works is by not having that many rules. It's kind of paradoxical. The more rules you have, the more rules you can get around. So if you want to go to the bathroom and you're a student, you go to the bathroom. If we treat you with respect, you'll act more trustworthy. So that's really what that's about. Ironically, this used to be a Navy base, a big, very, very big Navy base. There are quite a few parents who've come here, and electricians and plumbers who used to be in the Navy here. And I've sometimes seen fellows start to walk in a straight line and start marching just because they're back here again. And so the military is an example of a place that has very, very complex structures. And because it has very complex structures, maybe they need them for life and safety, I don't know, but it begets very simple behaviors. Simple structures beget complex behaviors. We want kids to elicit complex behaviors, so we keep the structures simple, and simple for the adults as well. When in the high school that I left, the 350-year-old high school, the reason I left, well, there were several, but the main reason is we couldn't change the schedule. Okay, and we tried. For 6 years in a row, we tried to change the schedule. We had, let's talk about that schedule, because that's an example. We had a 7-period day, which means if you think about the hours that you have, if you divide it into 7 pieces, each one of them is very short. And we'll assume that most classes take a few minutes to get ready and a few minutes to wind down, so you even have less time within less time. If you also look at, from running a 2,000 student high school, if you look at most of the incidents that happen with kids that you don't want to have happen, they happen when kids are outside of class passing each other. So you've designed something in which no one's ever really doing any solid kind of spending time and doing something deeply, and then they're popping up every half an hour and running around the building. And that doesn't make that much sense. And so we also had not just a 7-period day, we had a 7-day rotating schedule. So a 7-day rotating schedule meant that we did periods 1 through 7 one day, and then we did 2 through 7 and then 1 at the end of the day, and then we did 3 through 7 and then 1 and 2 at the end of the day, and then 4 through 7 and then 1, 2, 3 at the end of the day. And so the students from the university who wanted to volunteer and help our kids in science class were with the same kids every 7th Tuesday. And that's because we were on a pre-Copernican calendar and that the rest of the world was not on. So it made no sense. I sat in the room with a bunch of teachers and I said, we need to change the schedule. And one teacher very somberly said, we can't change the schedule won't let us. And everybody somberly agreed, as if the schedule were sitting at the table as an entity unto itself, that it couldn't be changed. So I guess my real answer to your question is the same question that we should ask about technology, actually, before we accept it. What is the problem that this technology is intended to remediate? What is the problem that this schedule is intended to remediate? What is the problem that this intervention is intended to remediate? It's really good to know what your purpose is, what your narrative is. So I think that, as my colleague Ted Sizer once said, that one of the best ways to understand a school is to look at the allocation of time, space, people, and resources, and then you can see how well it's doing that. So my first piece of advice to people would be to look at how you allocate time, space, people, and resources, because just because it's been done a long time that way doesn't mean it's the best thing to do. So the easiest way to describe the importance of a small school to anybody would be to say, Why is it that all of the private schools in every country and in every city have 400 kids maybe in their high school, and people are paying very large sums to go there? If they're paying such large sums, why don't they have 2,000 kids there, or 3,000 kids there like they do in public schools? Because it doesn't work that well. That's why. So small means that we know who everybody is, and and it's a safer, healthier environment if everybody knows who everyone is. That's mainly why.